Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Dr. James Show. I am Dr. James Smith Jr., and I'm looking forward to another compelling, informational, and transformational session. Just in case you're looking or listening, maybe you can feel this and see a different background. We are in San Diego, California on business this week, but I wanted to make sure the show goes on. I'm really looking forward to having Michelle Dickinson share her story. She's a well-being strategist. She's an author. She's a TEDx speaker. She says she's passionate about mental and health. So she's a mental and health change agent, and she's also a coach. And before I bring her out, we're going to show a video clip of Michelle sharing her purpose.
Tell the story and really open up a conversation, less fear, discussion about mental health, then I could make a contribution.
Michelle Dickinson.
My personal challenges with mental health as a child was the impact that my mom's constant depression had on me. And just being able to make sunshine when it was so gray. When I would stay home from school and I would sit with her and she would cry and sleep and cry and sleep, that was draining.
Michelle Dickinson, welcome aboard. I'm ready to dive into your compelling, riveting, wow story. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm so great. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm excited.
Oh, what an honor. I know a little bit about your story. I've read the book. We've talked about it, but I wanted you to come on to share your story, what you're doing, why you're doing it, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, all that stuff. But first, I'm going to pull a statement that I saw somewhere in your information, your marketing information. It says, there is no wealth without mental health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. But I need to acknowledge you. I really just need to start off by acknowledging you because you have been such an amazing friend and inspiration in terms of my entrepreneurial journey. And I acknowledge you and appreciate you for helping me in the earlier months of this journey. You've been so helpful and you're just such a wonderful soul. So thank you.
You're welcome. I didn't see that coming. You're welcome. Remember, so in the beginning, man, you come from big pharma. You were corporate in the 5, 8 to late, and you dove into the entrepreneurial waters. It's not easy, right, people, but look at you now.
It's not.
Look at you now.
Yeah, it's such a journey. I can't even begin to tell you. But let me answer your first question. I don't want to ignore your first question around you don't have anything basically without mental health, right? So health is mental health. You can't be physically fit and not have a handle on your well-being. That is so important. There's no health without mental health. And I'm really passionate about that because I think more and more people, especially coming out of COVID, are struggling in silence. And we have an opportunity to help them before we lose them. And that's really what I'm up to is I don't want people to suffer anymore. I want people to feel comfortable getting support.
Well, Michelle, when did this journey into mental health, when did it start for you? Or when did you realize something was different?
So I was minding my own business, just working in my corporate job, just doing my thing, thinking I'm going to retire from, the pharmaceutical industry one day. And I had a very dear colleague of mine. She found out about my story at lunch and went ahead and nominated me to give a TED Talk. And so I wound up stepping onto the TED stage and telling the story of my life growing up with my mother, who was bipolar, and what that experience was like caring for her, and then the impact that it was having on me as an adult woman. And so, just that actually catapulted me in an entirely different direction, because, the power of storytelling, firsthand, is so incredible. And once I stepped off the stage, people were coming up to me and wanting to tell, their relationship to mental health, their story. And I thought, well, if I could do that in a 10-minute TED Talk, what could I do if I wrote my book? Yeah. And so that sort of sent me down the road of becoming an advocate, an author, and just really outspoken and wanting to help people.
Michelle, go back to that stage. I mean, the TEDx stage is huge. Yeah. And you are about to get so vulnerable. I always say you're getting naked. You're bearing your soul. If you go back there, what was that like for you, where you just worrying about being a judge? You weren't worrying about what people were thinking or feeling. You were sharing your truth.
Yeah, it was terrifying and exhilarating. It's not like I was in some public forum telling my story of my childhood, the impact that has had on me as an adult, but I was telling it in front of my peers. So that was a little bit, overwhelming to think all these people are going to know. They're going to know why I am the way I am. They're going to know my story. Is that the right thing to do? But, in that moment, you realize what's at stake, what's really at stake. If I go first, if I'm one of the people with the courage to go first and open up this narrative, what's possible to follow? So I just was focused on the end game. And that is like, I'm going to be a change maker.
The courage to go first. That certainly is a phrase that pays. Now that led to your book. But before we dive into the book, you said you were on stage, you shared. You had to do that in your book as well. You were going to write a lot of what you shared on stage. And when we're listening to someone speak, we might miss some of it. But if the narrative is there, we can go back and reread. Did any apprehension creep into your mind where you put your fingers on the keyboard and said, let me tell my story?
I had moments. It was a 4-year writing process for a book that's not that long, honestly, but it required that I relive some of those experiences and go back to those moments of pain and go back to those moments of, frustration and anger and abuse, because my mother was extremely abusive. I just took a break. Every so often I would have to step back. I couldn't write. I had to just take a break for my own well-being and say, I can't. But every time I came back to writing, I was so committed that my book was going to reach people that needed to be reached, right? Like people were going to hear their story and my story, and maybe I could help them feel less alone and make a difference. So again, focusing on the end game and getting through the immediate pain was really my strategy.
Yeah, and in doing our research, we stumbled upon something that I thought was riveting. It's your book trailer. I want to show that right now, and then we'll get into the book. But it's all of 1 minute, but it really captures the essence of what you were going through.
Breaking Into My Life is a brutally candid memoir that chronicles the impact that growing up with a mentally ill mother had on Michelle, and how that experience continues to shape her and her work as an adult. The book is as painfully revealing as it is uplifting, and hopefully will inspire many to realize that they can overcome adversity in their lives as well. I wrote Breaking Into My Life to help myself, along with the rest of us, better understand the world of mental illness. I hope my story of perseverance and triumph helps challenge and transform the suffer in silence dynamic and makes mental illness more understood, treated, and accepted. Breaking Into My Life is available now on Amazon.
Breaking Into My Life. Wow. And you really get us in the beginning. We're on the edge of our seats. The chapter that's called The Knob. As I'm reading that, I'm thinking about you as a teenager, as a little girl, worrying about what's going to happen once I turn that knob. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was my life. That was my childhood. My mom was very strict. She had these extreme moments of like just complete discipline and strict, the way she wanted things done. And so she always said, you need to be home by 3:15. School let out at about 2:45. I had about a 20-minute walk home. And so if I was late, she locked the door. She locked me out. And that was her message to me, you shouldn't be late. And so I was always apprehensive if the door was going to be unlocked, but even more so, what mother was I coming home to? Because I just never knew, you know, with someone who's bipolar, there's just such volatility in their behavior. Like some days I would come home and she would be perfectly happy and thrilled to see me. Other days, oh, it was not good. I just needed to, you know, sort of lay low and just, you know, just be very careful. So there was always so much angst about the simple act of coming home from school.
So as you're walking home and you realize you're a little later than 3:15, you're already into survival mode. What do I say? What do I do? And that was every day. Or
Every day.
Close when you weren't home at the appropriate time?
Yep. Oh, every single day. And then it was, what's my story? What am I going to tell her? What if she's in a bad mood? What if she, you know, what if it's like 30 degrees outside? She's going to make me sit outside on the pavement, you know, for an hour or whatever to, you know, justify the punishment. And I just never knew. It was such a hard thing. As a little girl looking back, I'm like, God, you know, I can never imagine doing that to a child. But, you know, here my mother was suffering and she had bipolar disorder, and I'm not making excuses for her, but there's a very powerful statement, and that is the hurt others. And so that's what she knew to do if she was going to punish me, and, you know, because she was living in her own punishment, so to speak.
Now, you don't necessarily say what exactly attributed to it, but it seemed to happen around the time where your cousins came to live with you. There was a slight behavioral change that never stopped.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, you've done your homework and read the book. I don't know. But yeah, that's exactly what happened. I remember I have moments of memory in my mind when it was just my mother, my father, and I, and there was nothing but joy and happiness. And I don't remember my mom having a mean bone in her body. But then my cousins came to live with us. And I think that the added stress of suddenly now she's got 3 children to care for and a husband, and like a lot of pressure, I think that, you know, could have contributed to her bipolar disorder. And, you know, there are theories in my family that she had some unresolved PTSD from a lot of trauma in her younger years. So that's, you know, could have contributed as well.
Now, did you feel as though you were dealing with everything on your own? Did your father ever intervene, or basically you felt it was me and mom?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I learned early on that if I could keep her happy and keep peace in the home, then I would be okay. I would be okay. If I could help do whatever I could to keep peace in the home, I would be okay. You know, there were moments when I would visit my grandmother and my aunt who lived next to each other, and I would confide in them. They would ask me on the side, how are you doing? You know, so I had the love of them, of course, always. But for the most part, day to day with my mom and her volatility, it was pretty much just up to me to navigate.
Yeah, I think you spoke to that on the Good Morning show where you were interviewed. I want to show a little bit of this right now, where you basically said you did have some help, but for the most part, it was you. Let's take a look.
Well, it's estimated that only 1 out of every 3 people with mental illness receives treatment for it. Our next guest knows firsthand how hard it is to cope with the disease.
Michelle Dickinson Moravec grew up with a mom who suffered from bipolar disorder and at times lived with it untreated. Michelle wrote this book with the hope to help the world understand mental illness better. It is called Breaking Into My Life. Great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Incredible story. So you grew up, your mom, were you an only child? Or
I
did you
was.
have, okay, so
was.
you were adopted, right? And what was it like growing up with your mom? She was bipolar. So for people who aren't familiar with that particular form of mental illness,
Right.
what was that like for her and for you to experience a mom with that?
Yeah, so bipolar disorder typically has the rapid mood changes from being very, very high, very manic, and in a great mood to going into those deep, dark depressions. So where she could cry for hours and there's nothing you can do to console her, to the point where that roller coaster goes on, and then eventually she hits an all-time low and has to be hospitalized and treated there.
What was that like as a kid? Because oftentimes, you want to be parented, but in that situation, I can imagine there's a role reversal.
Exactly. I learned quite young to put my needs on the shelf and really focus on making sure that there was peace and harmony with my mom. So I did whatever I could to try to elevate her mood, thinking that I actually had control, but I really didn't. So it was hard. It was hard. I did find some support in my girlfriend's parents, and I found like some surrogate parents growing up who were just amazing to me. And I also had my family that surrounded me, like aunts and uncles and grandparents.
Yeah.
Michelle, as you watch that and listen to that, what's going on in your mind and your heart right now? What's going on?
First of all, that interview is like from right when I released the book, I think back in 18 or maybe the beginning of 19. So it's a little old. So I'm like looking at myself going, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It's a little weird. It had to like take me back for a second. But yeah, I mean, I did find a lot of love from, I think as young people, we are very resourceful and we don't even realize it. I was extremely resourceful and found love and affection and attention in other places because I wasn't getting it at home. And like my girlfriend's mother is a perfect example of that. So yeah, it's just, it's surreal to see that and to think back to that. Yeah.
If you would like to join the conversation with a comment or a question or just some thoughts, please feel free to do that. Michelle, this was your experience well into your adulthood, even when you started working full time, until you got that phone call, a call that you thought was going to be from your mom because she called you all the time. She blew you up, but it wasn't. It's really bad. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah. My mom, as she got older, sort of lost her enthusiasm for life, right? Like I was her really only daughter, and she put a lot of pressure on me, like, oh, I want grandchildren. When are you going to spend some more time with me? And so I had just seen her. I just spent time with her. And I remember her leaving my home, and I said, so, how are you? Are you going to be okay? And she said, well, Michelle, the days they come, the days they go. She was quite resigned about her life. And then I think maybe a week later was when my father called me to tell me that she had passed away. And so it's the power of our mental health. I mean, the state of our minds is so important. And I think her lack of zest for life is ultimately probably what contributed to her dying. I mean, she passed away in her 60s, way too young, So yeah, but that was gut wrenching because here the mother, so then I'm split, right? As a woman who had been very much manipulated by this woman. And I loved her, and she was extremely abusive, and I loved her. So I'm split in that moment. Am I finally free from the manipulation? How dare I be happy? I wasn't necessarily happy, but there was a sense of relief that she could no longer mess with me. And then there was just extreme grief that I never got the mother that I wanted. I always hoped that she would be the mother. I always hoped there'd be some magic, treatment that I would get my mother back, and it just never happened. And then I lost her. So yeah.
And then you share in the book, one chapter, it's called, I Married My Mom.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What happened there?
So we gravitate toward what's familiar, not necessarily what's good for us, right? You know this. I think we've had conversations about this. So, to get out of my house, I met this man, and it was a dad approved because he worked with us. We worked at IBM together, ironically, and I couldn't see it for anything. I just knew it was familiar, and it was remarkably better than being with my mother.
Sure.
And so, moved out, got engaged, got married, and then looked in the mirror and was like, oh my gosh, this person is the male version of my mother. And the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, all of that, was right there, and it was comfortable, and it was awful. So, yeah.
All those experiences have contributed to the phenomenal things you are doing today. And I want to touch on those. Before I do, there's a question in the chat room. It says, based upon your experiences, what would you say are 3 areas or more that are keys to good mental health?
Such a good question, Rodney. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I teach a lot of proactive mental health well-being tips in my resilience program. And one of the things I will tell you, which I think is the most important, is the self audit, is really assessing how you're doing emotionally, mentally. How are you doing? I think we are so busy in society. We're so busy with our jobs. We're busy that we're not checking in with ourselves. So I like to say, in the morning when you wake up, you do that body scan of like, oh man, my ankle still hurts, my shoulder still hurts. Why are we not doing that for how are we feeling? How are we doing? Because in the moment that you do this assessment on yourself, this audit, and maybe you don't feel so good, that's a chance to reach out and talk to someone before it escalates. So I will hit home over and over the self audit and just getting present to how you're really feeling and not ignoring if you're not feeling well is the single most important thing we can do to preserve our well-being.
That's wow. Every day, add that to your ritual of working out or meditating. That's self audit. Michelle, before you left corporate, you were instrumental in a affinity group that helped people that were dealing with mental health challenges. And I think it grew to incredible numbers very, very quickly. What was that like? Because oftentimes in corporate, there's the pushback, slow down. It has to be approved by 3 gajillion people. How were you able, what was the motivation? And how were you able to see it through?
Yeah. So in my earlier years at my company, I was involved with the Hispanic Employee Resource Group. And so I was on the leadership team of that. And I helped grow that affinity group. And then I found out that there was an initiative underway to create a mental health employee resource group that would be combined with the physical disability group. So we were having both the invisible and visible disabilities employee resource group coming together. And I was motivated by that because at the time I had just released my book. I was using the book. I was literally using the book to go up to executives and say, can I talk to your people about mental health?
That's good. That's good.
I just want to, let me just tell my story. Guarantee it's going to open up a narrative in your department. If you're cool with that, let's do it. I was really committed that we create a stigma-free environment because so many people were struggling. And when we did the research, the ambassador of mental health within the company said, the majority of employees here are not the ones that are suffering. It's the ones that they're caring for at home that are suffering, and that's impacting their well-being.
Yeah.
So it was this whole big, what do we do to bring these people together to connect them so they don't feel so alone? And there's magic in that, just creating the space for people to connect on things that they're struggling with. And so I was just really passionate that I wanted to be part of, that leadership team that drove that change. And it was remarkable to just having people not feel so alone.
And you didn't realize, or you might have realized, that your entrepreneurial and advocacy started then.
Pretty much.
Started getting your practice inside, much like I did as a speaker. Michelle, there's another question. Let's go to that. It says, what was the it that you use to muster through your feelings of not getting your affirmation as a child?
Yeah.
The it that you used as your, gosh, your strength, your blanket, your Linus blanket, whatever that was,
Yeah.
because you weren't getting the consistent affirmation or your needs met as a child?
I was always very driven and very hardworking. So I guess when I think about it, I leaned a lot into the accolades and appreciation that I was getting externally. Like, for example, I worked at a restaurant growing up. I worked at a restaurant probably 16, 17 years of age. And at that point, I was getting acknowledged for my contribution in the restaurant, and that was feeding me. You know, there's a chapter in my book called the attention of boys, I think, something like that. So I had no problem. I had no problem getting attention from boys. So I was always sort of finding ways to feed myself with what I was missing. So I don't know that there was an it was just, I was very resourceful. Like, God, when I think back about it, like I was incredibly resourceful. Like I volunteered, I worked at a restaurant that appreciated my hard work. That was feeding me. That appreciation and recognition was feeding me where the deficits were at home.
Good, that's good. In your book, you have it in 3 sections. One's called the growing up phase, the toll, then the transformation.
Right.
Look back on your life. Is that how you see it in your head, as what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, for many, many years, I was a victim. I played the role of the victim really well. You know, I was like, well, if you had my childhood, you would be screwed up. You know, it's very easy to play that role. And I would say that, like, for many years, I was very angry with my mother. I did, you know, I think we've talked about this. I did the Landmark Forum, and in the Landmark Forum, I got really present that, like, you know, that was a story. There was a lot of story that I had created around where I was in my life. And I was taking zero accountability and being at the effects of my childhood as the reason why I wasn't where I wanted to be. So I had to go through a lot of healing and stuff. So I think the transformation actually was when I finished this book was actually when more transformation continued, you know, like we're constantly evolving. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say that was the start. It's funny. I wrote a memoir when I was so young, and I'm laughing going, oh my God, like what's going to happen in the next 20 years? Like maybe I need to write memoir part 2. I mean, I don't know, because I'm constantly evolving, just like you and everyone, you know? So, yeah.
And you mentioned that you even experienced depression due to divorce.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that about? Because you're constantly becoming.
Yeah, I never expected it. So I'm adopted. So I was always like, listen, I'm adopted. I'm not going to have her bipolar disorder. It's not in my family, my blood family. But I found myself going through a divorce. And I found myself depressed, and I was like, well, you know, this is depression. Like I, of course, well, for me, I had always struggled with like seasonal depression, but then like I would go to an island and I would be okay. Like that would buy my time until spring, right? That was my formula. Like
those pina coladas, right?
Get a pina colada, get some sun, you know, and you'll be okay. But then this hit me, and I was like, I couldn't get out of bed. I was depressed. I was crying. I was a mess. I was gaining weight. All of these things were happening. And I was like, oh my goodness, I must be depressed. So because I had always had a healthy relationship to therapy, I reached out and I found who I consider to be one of the best therapists, and he helped me, and I got through it. It wasn't any long-term mental illness. It was life. It was like a life challenge that he helped me through. But gosh, when I had that experience, I got an entirely different perspective on this thing called mental health advocacy that I had been doing.
Yeah.
You know, coming from the lens of someone who loved someone with mental illness is very different than actually suffering it and not being able to, you know, get out of bed. So, yeah.
I'm going to go back to the chat room. The question says, when working as a leader or manager, what can I do for my staff? And what are the signs from my employees that says this is a more severe illness that needs some expert in medical treatment? So It's like the person is saying, that's the leader, that's the manager.
Yeah.
Give me a GPS. What can I do?
And this is why I love working with organizations, because so many people are in Anders' shoes. I don't know what to do, and I think it might be more. And so one of the things I would say is don't take on the responsibility of being a clinician and fixing it. That's not your job as a leader. It's just not. And you're taking on way too much that you need to be like, I'm going to diagnose them. I'm going to send them this way. You don't have to do that. Honestly, you just need to notice behavior changes, and you need to be extremely well-versed in the resources that are available. And you need to listen. Just listen, because that person might not have anybody that they're talking to, and they just listening to them, you can understand how they're doing and ground them in what's available to them. But we oftentimes don't want to address it because we feel we're going to take on the burden of I'm going to have to fix it. I'm going to have to tell them exactly where to go. I don't want that responsibility. But honestly, as a leader, the best thing you can do is just demonstrate compassion, listening, and connect them to support. That's the greatest thing you can do.
Michelle, I like to say to listen for what's said and for what's not said, as well as to listen for the CMF. The C stands for content, the M stands for meaning, and the F stands for feeling. So listen for the content, meaning, and feeling. The content might be totally different from the feeling. Someone comes over to you and you're not feeling well. Michelle, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine.
Right.
It was, I'm fine.
Right.
But if I'm listening for the unsaid, the meaning and the feeling, I may get to a whole new definition. We're so quick to listen and rush to recovery, or rush to an answer, or rush to our story. Why is this so significant in today's workplace? Having things in place. Gosh, the Olympics, the gymnast Simone Biles, tennis with Naomi, these two big experiences right in our face. So the two questions: why is this so significant now in the workplace, having measures in place? And number two, just your reactions on those two superstar athletes and how they're coping and dealing with their mental health challenges.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer the second one first. And I am in awe with their courage to speak up, because they have the attention of the globe looking at them. And if they have the courage to talk about what they're dealing with and lead by example, then so many people might feel less alone. So I am in awe that they are being, I mean, it's unfortunate, but those are the people we need to see, just like the Eagle down in Philly who anxiety took him off the field. I will never forget that story. Yes. We have a challenge with men committing suicide. We need to have more people that we are looking up to, like, wow, look at these people, and oh, they're human beings too, and they can only take so much. It gives me permission to be in my humanness. And that's
the courage to speak up. And you always say, courage over fear. Courage over fear.
Yeah. So why is it such a big deal? Look at us. We just lived through a pandemic, right? 15 months. How many of those months were we locked in our homes, where we couldn't socialize? We were withheld the very things that brought us joy, the loved ones that we missed, that we couldn't see. They say that it's 42% of global employees have suffered a mental health decline since the beginning of this pandemic.
Wow. Can you say that again? That's a huge number.
42% global employees. So that's why it's so important, and employers have such a great opportunity to show up for their people. They really, really do. And they don't have to do a lot, right? They probably already provide benefits. They probably provide an employee assistance hotline. But what are they doing to normalize the narrative in the workplace? So that's my sweet spot. That's what I want to help them really get to, because benefits unused don't matter. They don't matter. Suffering employees, who are disengaged, who are not happy, who have some type of PTSD from this whole experience, just need support. So I don't know. I don't want to sound like a commercial, but we need bridges to help people get from I don't have a healthy relationship to brain health to I have a healthy relationship to brain health now, and I'm not ashamed to reach out for support. Who's doing that? And that's what I love to be able to do for people, is it's okay to not be okay.
I love the way you frame it. Normalizing the narrative. if we can't talk about it, we can't manage it, we can't solve it, we can't lead it. Let me go back to the chat room. It says, I'm learning so much. Just listen and be well-versed in the resources. I'm a great listener, but I do not know the resources. Where can we look to find some of the resources you're talking about?
For sure. For sure. You want me to answer that one before?
Yes,
you
please.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, if you're an employee, if you're a leader in an organization, find out what your company's offerings are. But there are tremendous free resources out there outside of organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, Mental Health America, and they all have resources. And NAMI specifically will give you signs and symptoms of different types of illnesses, so you can see if my loved one might be exhibiting 3 or 4 or more of those symptoms. Then you know, okay, then there has to be some type of additional action necessary. But there's a lot of great resources, like My Wellbeing is out there if you want to try to find a therapist. Psychology Today will give you a local therapist with, that's backed by Psychology Today. Yeah, there's tons for sure.
Michelle, they can follow you. You have yes, you have your webinar, resilience webinar. I mean, you're full of information. That'd be a good. How can they follow you? Where can they check out your information?
Yeah, so I do my own series on YouTube, and I stream it as well. So I'm always having guests on talking about resources, right? So that's important. So my website is careforyourpeople.com, and you can always follow, and you'll access all my social media from that page, and you can reach out and you can follow me across Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of it.
Another question: what are your thoughts on the treatment with the person with severe mental illness, for example, PTSD, bipolar, etc.? Are pharmaceuticals doing it this way? No pun intended, speaking to a former pharmaceutical leader. So our questioner is knocking on your pharmaceutical experience.
Yeah, so I think the one thing I would say is find yourself a good therapist who is going to diagnose you for you. I don't think we can make a blanket statement and say all drugs are bad, all drugs are good, because when it comes down to it, you're a complex individual, a complex human being that should be treated for what you've navigated in your life, and an expert and a clinician should be the one to tell you what they recommend for treatment. That's not my wheelhouse. I'm not a clinician. So I would say making sure that you're getting the best care from the best doctors, and following their recommendations.
All right, another in the chat room. Actually, this is from the Q&A section. How did you manage to grow and move forward from the tough experience of marrying your mom? So how did you grow? We talked about it a little earlier, but how did you grow?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I think, when I was getting divorced, I went to therapy, right? I had an amazing therapist, and that was my first real look in the mirror, right? Why am I choosing who I'm choosing? Why do I gravitate to these people that hurt me? Why don't I stand up for myself? Being a young girl, putting everyone else's needs before my own, groomed a woman that puts everyone else's needs before her own. So I had to really look at that. But then after therapy, I wound up, trying to get curious about myself and putting myself through leadership and self-awareness programs like the Landmark Forum. Landmark Worldwide has an entire series around the study of being, ontology, which helps you really dissect, what stories you tell yourself based on your past experiences. And then I went on and I did Tony Robbins, because I just am just a kind of person that was very, very curious about why I am the way I am. So
you went deeper and deeper.
And so all of those things helped me. And then, and then getting back into therapy. So I'd say therapy, being curious about why you are the way you are, getting into some self-discovery work where you're really dissecting your thought patterns and your behaviors and why you are the way you are. So I'd say those two things were huge.
Michelle, let's jump into the hot seat.
Oh boy.
Hot seat is a quick activity where you talk to think rather than thinking to talk. I give you a word or two words, and you share the first word that comes to your mind when you hear that word. Are you ready for the hot seat?
I am ready.
Mental health.
Compassion.
Help.
Oh, wow.
You're thinking.
I mean, oh gosh, like I would want to, the first word.
First word comes to your mind when you hear the word help.
Love.
Mother.
Innocent.
Leader.
Compassion again.
Resources.
Abundant.
Love.
Self.
Organizations.
Empathy.
Change.
Inevitable.
Pandemic.
Crisis.
Responsibility.
Collective.
You are off the hot seat. Now, if you think that was hot, I came across a picture of you at an award show. The host, let's take a look at that picture and tell us what's going on here. Michelle, you're getting out there doing a whole lot of things since you left corporate. So what's happening here?
You are a piece of work. I can't believe you found that. Oh, Lord. Yeah, my very dear friend, he has created a sitcom that's going to be released in September. And so this was, it's very, very funny. It's called No Filter. And so he's tackling this ridiculous divide that we have right now in humanity with humor. He's bridging us back together using humor. And so this was the award show, and the award show, I don't want to steal its thunder, but it's hysterical. And so you have to watch. It's coming out. It's No Filter, and he's really up to good things, just trying to bring us all back together with humor. And I think it's a beautiful effort.
I love it. Talk about tackling things. I know you are extremely athletic, and you tackle this three-tiered experience year after year after year. And I believe we have a picture of you on a bike tackling the road. Let's take a look.
Oh, Lord.
The picture. And
You guys
let us know.
really went
Let us know what's happening here.
So that was a triathlon I did. God, that one was from 2 years ago, before this pandemic.
Triathlons, huh?
Yeah. So it's a swim, it's a ride, and it's a run. And so my cousin has been challenging me year after year to do it with him and his girlfriend, and I've been doing it. And we just finished one in July 17th. We did one together, the first one after the pandemic. But it's amazing. It's exhilarating. Yeah.
Wow. So it's your journey has come full circle, where you really are attacking life. You're an advocate for so many. You're attacking life. You're growing through your experiences. You've done Tony Robbins. You've done Landmark. You continue to be vulnerable. Put yourself out there. What advice would you have for us to help normalize the narrative, to step up more, to be more of an advocate and not just an ally, just everyday normal people?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things that come to mind when you say that, right? Like, first of all, no matter how challenging your past is, you have the beautiful, clean slate of the future that you get to create. So don't be the victim of your past. Don't be the victim of your past circumstances. And I would say, when it comes to mental health, we all have a role with mental health. We all have a role in helping to normalize the narrative. And we can simply do that by acknowledging how we feel and talking about it. Because when we talk about it, we're giving those around us permission for them to even acknowledge how they're doing and for them to talk about it. And that's a powerful place to be for those you love.
Tell us more about what you're doing in your role as an entrepreneur, working with companies, working with organizations, working with groups. You're speaking, you do your podcast, you work hands-on, your webinars. Tell us more about what you're doing and your goal.
Sure. So my goal is to really empower employers to recenter their employees, because right now a lot of people coming out of the pandemic are struggling, and it's compromising an organization whether or not they choose to look at it. So my programs recenter employees. I have resilience programs. I have all kinds of programs around well-being that give them tangible daily strategies and tools they can implement to proactively, manage their well-being before they hit a crisis. So that's what I'm up to. I want to help one workplace at a time, get recentered, feel good, be a contribution in their lives and also in their jobs.
I love it. I love it. Another question from the chat room says, what would you say to a person who sees a friend or family member with poor mental health? This is, again, the everyday Doug or Diane. What would you say to a person who sees a friend or family member struggling with mental health?
I think it's a matter of, again, being courageous enough to acknowledge that they see a behavior shift, right? If you love someone and you notice their behavior is different than you know them to be, just having the courage to acknowledge that, and then maybe even just sharing a little bit about a time when you weren't doing so well. Maybe you suffered from some type of depression or anxiety. Maybe you can open the conversation by being a little vulnerable yourself. And who knows where that will go, but don't step over it and don't look away, because you could be the one person that can have them feel heard and be a little bit vulnerable because you chose to show your vulnerability.
I love it. I love it. I think our next picture really speaks to what you just said here. And I'd like for you to talk about it. It says, until you spread your wings, you will have no idea how far you can fly. Go for it.
Where did you find this? This is terrible. You're going through all my pictures. It's so funny. Yeah, so I guess for me, I always was the woman that was very insecure and very much like my voice doesn't matter, right? Growing up with a mom like that, like, of course, like my voice, I was invisible. So I guess for me, it took a while for me to realize my own power. It took a while for me to realize what I'm capable of doing, and once you get out of your way and you do things like Landmark, you do things like Tony Robbins, you get out of your own way and you divorce yourself from the story that you are the daughter of a bipolar mother, you get to create your future. And I think, I'm literally, sometimes I'm in shock that I actually have how far I've come, because we're always looking to how far we want to go, but we don't pause and look at how far we've come. And that's really, I think, where I was coming from with that picture, is just like I got this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow my heart and make a difference.
Make a difference. Michelle, someone in the chat room said, let's get to it. Michelle, you are a powerful leader. You make things that are difficult look easy. Perfect example of how to lead by example. Yes, yes, yes. Question for you.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
What would you say, as the woman you are now, what would you say to young Michelle? Or what would young Michelle say to the woman she's turned into today? If you were able to just in some way, somehow have that fictitious conversation, what would the young Michelle say to Michelle current? And what would Michelle today say to little Michelle?
I would say to younger Michelle, stop caring about the noise. Stop caring about the opinions of others. I think we get so caught up with worrying about what people are going to say, what people are going to think about us. Judgment is always going to be there, but we can't let it stop us. And so I think for me, it's like stop listening to the noise and just focus on where you're going.
And how about little Michelle talking to grown-up Michelle, the athlete, the change agent, the triathlete, the the woman who's on TV, who's written a book, does a podcast, webinar, works with organizations, what would she say to you?
Just keep going. Keep going. You got this. Keep going.
Good stuff. Well, I don't know if you've ever have seen the end of our show. We asked our guests to do a mini keynote. I'm a speaker. I speak for a living, and we give our guests an opportunity to do the same. So I'm going to ask you to look right in that camera, do mic check, make sure your mic is great and we can hear it. Look right into that camera and give us a 30 to 60 second keynote on your advice, wisdom, call to action, what's significant for us now, our why. What will it be, ladies and gentlemen? Next voice you will hear be that of Michelle Dickinson with her keynote on mental health.
Did not see this coming. Okay. All right. So the next time you're not feeling well, have the courage to go within, to take someone up into your head with you and have them understand what you're dealing with. And be courageous to not step over if someone is suffering. Be courageous to engage with them and talk to them and help them. You don't have to fix it. Don't take on the burden of fixing it. Just take on the responsibility of being a human and showing your compassion and you're showing your heart and helping someone else not suffer.
Mic drop, bang, bang. Michelle, what's next for you? What's on your to-do list? Stay busy. Is there another book? Is there a movie? Are the clients you're working with? Is there a mountain to climb since you're a triathlete? What's next?
I love you. You're awesome. No, I would say, well, the audiobook. I'm working on the audiobook right now. So that you're going to be able to get that on audio, which is exciting. But the thing that I'm really excited about is I have been hearing time and time again from my customers, my clients, that they need something for their people leaders because people leaders have tremendous trepidation around engaging their employees if they notice they're not well. So I am finalizing my leader program to help leaders feel comfortable and not paralyzed in reaching out and supporting their people when it comes to emotional and mental well-being. So I'm really excited about that program. I continue to work with organizations of all sizes to make a difference for their people. And I am looking, obviously, to work with as many people as possible to make an impact.
Now, let me slide this in there real quick. It seems as though we might be going backwards with regard to the pandemic. Things are getting dicier again. Wearing masks, not wearing masks, whatever, vaccine, no vaccine.
Right.
Tips or thoughts or ideas for people to deal with this part of this experience that's now month number 17, 18, 19?
I know. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's what I teach all the time. Stay informed, but don't get overly consumed with media and news. We need to stay informed. This Delta thing is no joke. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's coming. We're hearing the noise about what's happening in other states. Stay informed, but do not overconsume the news because you will feel disempowered instantly. Focus on your health. Focus on what can I do to boost my immune system? What am I eating? Am I taking care of myself? Am I exercising? Am I sleeping well? Am I hydrating? You have full control over your immune system. Focus on that and focus on minimizing the amount of media you're consuming.
Beautiful, beautiful. Michelle Dickinson, we thank you. The chat room is thanking you out loud for you sharing your wisdom, your experience, your thoughts, your action steps and tips. I know I have my copy and I encourage you to get your copy again. Michelle, can you give us your website again so we can make sure we put it out more time?
So you can get my book at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but my website is careforyourpeople.com.
Again, thank you. You're huge and you're local. You're right there in North Jersey, correct?
I am in Westfield.
So people can reach you. They don't have to put you on a plane and bring you into their organization. You can drive right there. Although we do have some international listeners as well. So thank you again, my friend. And for you, again, we keep bringing information. And give us some questions. Give us some thoughts. Who do you want to hear from? What do you want to talk about? They'll be on the show. For those of you who are looking to improve your presentation skills, your leadership skills, your storytelling skills, our next boot camp is September 23rd and 24th at the Pyramid Club in Philadelphia. Come get gym-packed. Come get it. We'll be there for you. We will see you next week. Please bring a friend. We want to gym-pack you. Take care. And like I always say, you've just been gym-packed.